The year was 597 AD, and the air was thick with the scent of fear and uncertainty. King Æthelberht of Kent, a towering figure with a beard that commanded respect, stood on the shore of the Isle of Thanet, watching as a strange ship approached. The vessel, unlike any he had seen before, carried a group of men dressed in simple, dark robes. They were strangers, but their presence was not entirely unexpected. A few months earlier, a message had arrived from the distant city of Rome, from a man called Pope Gregory, who had sent these strangers with a mission, to bring a new religion to the land of the Angles and Saxons. Æthelberht's mind was a whirl of thoughts. He was a king, a ruler whose power was rooted in the ancient traditions of his people. His ancestors were said to have descended from the god Woden, and his kingship was a sacred trust. Yet here were these strangers, promising a new way, a new god, and a new future. The king's wife, Bertha, a Frankish princess, had already embraced this new faith, and she had built a small church near the royal court. But Æthelberht was a man of the old ways, and the idea of changing his beliefs was not something he took lightly. The ship landed, and a tall, solemn man stepped onto the shore. His name was Augustine, and he carried a staff and a Bible. He walked with the confidence of a man who believed in his mission. Æthelberht met him in an open field, surrounded by his warriors and advisors. The king's eyes scanned the faces of the strangers, trying to judge their intentions. Augustine began to speak, his voice carrying the weight of a new world. "Great King Æthelberht," Augustine said, his words clear and measured, "I come with a message from the one true God, the God of all creation. He has sent me to bring you and your people the light of his word, to show you the path to salvation and eternal life." Æthelberht listened, his expression unreadable. He had heard of the Roman god before, but the idea of abandoning the gods of his ancestors was a daunting one. He had seen the power of Woden in the victories of his ancestors, in the strength of his warriors, and in the fertility of the land. But he was also a man of curiosity, and the words of the stranger stirred something deep within him. "Tell me more of this god," Æthelberht said, his voice steady. "What does he offer that my own gods do not?" Augustine began to preach, his words painting a picture of a world beyond this one, a world of peace and eternal life. He spoke of a God who loved his people, who had sent his Son to save them from sin and death. The king listened, his mind weighing the words against the traditions of his own faith. As the sun began to set, Æthelberht dismissed the gathering, but not before promising to consider Augustine's message. The next few months were a time of deep reflection for the king. He consulted with his council, his priests, and his wife. He visited the sacred sites where his ancestors had prayed, seeking guidance from the old gods. But something in Augustine's words had resonated with him, a call to something greater, something beyond the world he knew. In the end, Æthelberht made his decision. He would embrace the new faith, not just for himself, but for his people. The king was baptized, and the first church in Kent was built. The conversion of Æthelberht marked the beginning of a new era, a time when the old gods would slowly give way to the new. But the change was not without its challenges. Æthelberht's son, Rædwald, would later revert to the old faith, and the conversion of the Anglo-Saxons would be a long and often violent process. Yet the seeds had been planted, and the world of the Heptarchy would never be the same. The king looked out over his kingdom, now bathed in the light of a new dawn. The future was uncertain, but one thing was clear. The old ways were giving way to the new, and the world was changing. The mission to bring Christianity to England was moving forward. In 601, a second team from Rome, led by Augustine's deputy Laurentius, arrived in England. They brought with them important letters from Pope Gregory and a special garment called a pallium, which was a symbol of Augustine's role as archbishop. Augustine was then officially made the archbishop and set up his headquarters in Canterbury. Pope Gregory had hoped Augustine would choose the old Roman city of Londinium as his main base, but Augustine knew that wasn't practical. The King of Kent, Æthelberht, wouldn't have liked the idea of the main Christian center being in the territory of his neighbor and nephew, Sæberht, the King of Essex. So, Canterbury became the center of the new church in England. Sæberht followed his uncle's lead and converted to Christianity in 604. The city of London received its first bishop, Mellitus, and another bishop, Justus, was installed in the old Roman city of Rochester. Within a decade, the Roman mission had established 3 important centers in England, and Pope Gregory was pleased. Augustine reported that he had baptized 10,000 people in one campaign alone. The influence of Christianity spread further when Rædwald, the king of the East Angles, visited Æthelberht's court and converted. The East Angles were known for their wealth, as shown by the treasures found in the Sutton, whose ship burial. However, Rædwald's conversion might have been more about politics than faith. When he returned home, he allowed both Christian and pagan practices to continue, even setting up altars for both religions in the same temple. Despite this, Rædwald played a crucial role in English history. He defeated Æthelberht of Bernicia at the Battle of the River Idle in 616, paving the way for Edwin, who would become the first Christian king of Northumbria. Rædwald's complicated relationship with Christianity posed a problem for Bede, the historian who wrote about these events a century later. Bede had to balance Rædwald's support for Edwin and his early conversion with his later return to paganism. Rædwald's kinswoman, Æthelfrith, was a saintly figure who founded the abbey at Ely, but this only added to the complexity of his legacy. The transition from paganism to Christianity was not always smooth. After Augustine's death in 610, his successor Laurentius faced challenges. When Æthelberht died and his son Eadbald took over, Eadbald initially returned to pagan practices. Justus and Mellitus left for Gaul, but Laurentius stayed and eventually persuaded Eadbald to convert. This secured the future of the Roman mission in England. Kent was unique among the Anglo-Saxon kingdoms. It took its name from the local people. The Cantwara and its customs were deeply rooted. One of the most enduring customs was gavelkind, a form of land tenure that lasted until 1926. Kent was divided into areas called lathes, which were centered around royal estates. The king's main seat was in Canterbury, and the kingdom had strong ties to the continent, as shown by the discovery of Frankish artifacts in Kentish graves. One of Æthelberht's most significant achievements was the creation of a written law code. This was a groundbreaking move for an English ruler. Æthelberht's laws were based on Roman examples, but they were written in the English language, making them the first known legal documents in English. These laws dealt with issues like theft, property damage, and personal injuries. They also included provisions for the protection of the church and the king's property. Æthelberht's code was likely influenced by the Roman legal system, but it was tailored to the customs of the Cantwara. The use of English in the code was a significant step, as other Germanic codes were written in Latin. The code aimed to provide a clear set of rules and to protect the king's interests, but it also reflected a desire for transparency and fairness in governance. Over time, the laws in Kent became more focused on religious matters. King Witted, who ruled in the early 8th century, introduced laws that aimed to enforce religious practices, such as infant baptism and Sunday observance. This showed that the church was becoming more integrated into the legal system, and that the king was using the law to promote Christian values. The social structure in Kent, and in other parts of England, was complex. At the top was the king, followed by thegns noble warriors, ealdormen local rulers, and ceorls free farmers. Below them were the slaves, who had no legal rights. The concept of wergild, or man price, was crucial in determining a person's status. If someone was injured or killed, the wergild was the payment made to their family. If the payment went to the person's family, they were free. If it went to their lord, they were a slave. The ceorls, who were free farmers, had varying degrees of wealth and freedom. Some were prosperous and attended local meetings, while others were more dependent on their lords. The nobles, or thegns, had higher wergilds and more rights. They often served the king in battle and had obligations to their lord, but they also had the right to defend themselves and their families. As Christianity spread, the church became a powerful institution. By 604, there were 3 bishops in England: Augustine in Canterbury, Justus in Rochester, and Mellitus in London. Despite some setbacks, such as the departure of Justus and Mellitus when Eadbald initially rejected Christianity, the church continued to grow. The Archbishop Honorius, who served from around 630 to 653, helped solidify the Christian presence in England. The church's influence extended beyond religious matters. It played a role in education, law, and social welfare. Monasteries and churches became centers of learning and charity, and the laws began to reflect Christian values. The relationship between the church and the state was complex, but it shaped the development of English society in the early Middle Ages. In the 630s, a monk named Birinus, who might have been from Italy, converted King Cynegils of Wessex to Christianity. King Oswald of Northumbria, a powerful leader, stood as Cynegils' sponsor during his baptism, and even gave the old Roman fort of Dorchester upon Thames to Birinus to serve as his church. Later, the main church in Wessex moved to Winchester. In the kingdom of the East Angles, another important figure, Archbishop Honorius, played a big role in spreading Christianity. Around 630, there was a struggle between old pagan beliefs and the new Christian faith. Rædwald's successor became a Christian because of King Edwin of Deira, but he was killed by his own people. Rædwald's brother, Sæberht, who had become a Christian while living in Europe, returned to take the throne. He wanted to bring Christianity back, but without being controlled by the powerful Northumbrian king. Sæberht found help in Bishop Felix, a man from Burgundy who was already a bishop. Felix came to Archbishop Honorius and asked to do missionary work. It seems that Sæberht and Felix had already planned this. Honorius agreed, and Sæberht gave Felix a place called Damok, probably the town of Dunwich, to set up his church. Felix, with help from Canterbury, built a school and trained teachers, following the model he knew from Europe. Sæberht's story is interesting. He was very devoted to his new faith, and eventually gave up his throne to live in a monastery. However, he still had a reputation as a strong war leader. When the kingdom was attacked by Penda, a powerful pagan king, Sæberht's courtiers begged him to lead the battle. He refused and was dragged from the monastery. Even then, he refused to fight and was killed, holding only a staff. This story is similar to the later legend of King Saint Edmund. Penda's son, Peta, also converted to Christianity when he married a Christian princess. This marked the end of paganism in the region. In 653, Archbishop Honorius died, and the Roman Church's position in southern England became stronger. Honorius had consecrated the first native Anglo-Saxon bishop, and was succeeded by another Anglo-Saxon, Deucedit, from Wessex. In 664, a very important meeting called the Synod of Whitby took place in Deira, which had a big impact on the Church in England. In 668, Theodore of Tarsus, a Greek man about 60 years old, was appointed as the Archbishop of Canterbury. He was chosen almost by chance and served until 690. Theodore was a scholar and had studied in Constantinople, where he learned about philosophy, medicine, and astronomy. He was also involved in a major religious debate in Rome about whether Christ had one will or two. This debate was a big issue between the emperor and the pope. Theodore arrived in England with Bishop Badusing, a nobleman from Northumbria. Once in Canterbury, Theodore started making changes. He filled empty bishop positions and organized the first nationwide meeting of the English Church, called a synod at Hertford. He also created new dioceses, which reduced the power of some bishops. This led to a conflict with Wilfrid, a powerful bishop from Northumbria, who appealed to Rome and won his case. Despite this, Wilfrid's diocese was still reduced. Theodore also played a role in a major international meeting called the Sixth Ecumenical Council, which took place in 680. This council was about the same religious debate that Theodore had been involved in earlier. The council approved the decisions made at a previous meeting in Hatfield, which Theodore had organized. In Wessex, the transition to Christianity was not smooth. Cynegils, the first Christian king, was followed by his son Cenwalh, who went back to paganism for a while. Cenwalh eventually returned to Christianity and founded a church in Winchester. He continued to be a war leader and expanded his territory. After his death, his widow Sigsberga ruled for a short time. In the 680s, a warrior named Caedwalla, who had a Celtic name but claimed royal descent, took the throne. He was a powerful warlord who conquered Kent and Sussex. He was converted to Christianity and in 688 abdicated to go on a pilgrimage to Rome. There he was baptized and died shortly after. The early medieval kings and their warriors were known for their wealth and the display of their weapons. The most important weapons were the helmet, shield, and sword. The shield was large and round, often decorated with intricate designs. The sword was the most valued weapon, sometimes passed down through generations and often adorned with gold and other precious metals. The swordsmith was a highly respected craftsman, and the process of making a sword, called pattern welding, involved twisting and hammering strips of iron to create a strong and beautiful blade. Archaeologists have found many weapons in graves, but not all of these graves belong to actual warriors. Some belong to children or men who were too disabled to fight. This shows that weapons were not just practical tools, but also symbols of status and power. In the 8th century, the kingdom of Wessex was on the rise, thanks to King Æthelberht, who ruled from 688 to 726. During his reign, Wessex became more organized and powerful. Æthelberht was a strategic leader who not only expanded his territory, but also laid the groundwork for a strong government. One of Æthelberht's most significant achievements was the creation of the first West Saxon law code. This code was important because it helped establish order and set rules for how people should behave. It included laws about things like theft, payment of fines, and the responsibilities of different community members. For example, the law code mentioned shire courts, which were like local government centers where people could resolve disputes. These courts were presided over by a royal agent called a sermon, or shireman. Æthelberht also introduced the concept of shires, which were large administrative regions. Some of these shires, like Hampshire, Wiltshire, Dorset, and Somerset, are still around today. Each shire had its own unique name, often derived from important places or people. For instance, Hampshire and Wiltshire were named after royal residences, while Dorset and Somerset were named after the local settlers near forts. Another key aspect of Æthelberht's rule was his interest in trade and commerce. He established the port of Hamwick, which became an important trading center. This port helped Wessex connect with other parts of Europe, boosting the kingdom's economy. Æthelbert also minted the first West Saxon coins, which made trade easier and more standardized. Æthelbert's reign also saw significant religious developments. He consulted both lay and church advisors when creating his laws, which included rules about infant baptism and tithes. The kingdom was divided into two new bishoprics, Winchester and Sherborne, and Æthelbert supported the construction of monasteries, like the one at Malmesbury, where the scholar Aldhelm served as abbot. Despite his many achievements, Æthelbert faced challenges. He had to deal with rivalry and conflict, both within his kingdom and with neighboring regions. For example, he fought against the British king Geraint of Dumnonia, and had to manage relationships with other kingdoms like Kent and Sussex. Æthelbert's reign ended when he abdicated to make a pilgrimage to Rome, where he died. After him, a series of kings ruled Wessex, each facing their own set of challenges. King Cuthred, who ruled from 740 to 756, fought against the powerful king of Mercia, Æthelbald, and later against the Britons. King Cynwulf, who ruled from 757 to 786, had a long and successful reign, but it ended in tragedy when he was murdered by a rival. The next king, Beorhtric, ruled from 786 to 802. During his reign, something significant happened that would foreshadow future events. In 787, the first Viking ships arrived in England, landing at Portland. The king's reeve, or local official, went to meet them but was killed. This event marked the beginning of the Viking raids, which would become a major threat to England in the coming decades. In 802, Ecgbert became king of Wessex. He would go on to become one of the most important kings in English history. Ecgbert expanded Wessex's influence over other kingdoms, including Kent, Surrey, Sussex, and Essex. He was known as a Bretwalda, a title given to powerful kings who ruled over multiple regions. However, the latter part of his reign was marked by ongoing conflicts with the Vikings, who continued to raid and threaten the kingdom. Northumbria, another powerful kingdom in the north, was also making significant contributions to English and European culture during this time. Northumbria was a united kingdom of Dara and Bernicia, and its kings and scholars played a crucial role in the development of early medieval Europe. They founded monasteries, produced important works of literature, and sent missionaries across the continent, spreading Christianity and knowledge. The 8th century was a time of transformation and challenge for both Wessex and Northumbria. While they faced external threats and internal conflicts, they also made lasting contributions to the cultural and political landscape of England and beyond. The story of the Frankish kingdom and Northumbria is a tale of kings' battles and the spread of Christianity. It all began when Clovis, a barbarian leader, converted to Catholic Christianity in the early 500s, founding the Frankish kingdom that would dominate much of Western Europe. But after Clovis, the kingdom fell into chaos, with his successors, the Merovingian kings, fighting among themselves. In 714, a significant event occurred. Saint Willibrord, a bishop from Northumbria, baptized Pippin, the son of Charles Martel. When Pippin grew up, he overthrew the last Merovingian king with the Pope's blessing, and became the new king of the Franks in 751. His son, Charlemagne, would later lead a cultural renaissance in Europe, with the help of scholars like Alcuin of York. But let's go back to Northumbria, where the story of the Golden Age begins. Northumbria was made up of 2 kingdoms, Bernicia and Dara, united under strong rulers. The first of these was Æthelberht, a pagan king who expanded his territory by defeating his neighbors. He was eventually overthrown by Edwin, who had been in exile. Edwin became a powerful king, extending his rule over other British kingdoms and even parts of Mercia. He also converted to Christianity, influenced by his wife, a princess from Kent. This conversion was a significant moment, as it brought Roman Christianity to Northumbria and led to mass baptisms. Edwin's reign ended tragically when he was killed in battle in 633. For a while, it seemed like the Christian faith would fade in Northumbria. But then Oswald, Edwin's nephew, returned from exile and defeated the enemy at the Battle of Heavenfield. Oswald was a Christian who had been baptized in the Irish tradition. He reached out to the Irish monastery of Iona for help, and they sent a bishop named Aidan. Aidan established a monastery on the island of Lindisfarne, which became a center of learning and culture. The Irish influence continued to shape Northumbria. Monks and scholars from Ireland, like Aidan, brought their unique style of Christianity and learning. The Irish tradition valued simplicity and a deep connection to the natural world. This blend of Irish and Anglo-Saxon culture produced some of the most remarkable works of the time, such as the Lindisfarne Gospels and the Book of Kells. One of the most important figures in this golden age was Bede, a monk who wrote extensively about the history and culture of Northumbria. His works, including the ecclesiastical history of the English people, have given us a rich understanding of this period. Bede's writings not only recorded the events of his time, but also celebrated the achievements of the Northumbrian kings and the spread of Christianity. The Golden Age of Northumbria was a time of great change and creativity. It saw the rise of powerful kings, the spread of Christianity, and the birth of a unique cultural tradition. The legacy of this period continued to influence Europe for centuries, and the stories of its heroes and scholars remain a source of inspiration today.